Yep. So what's up, everybody? This is Brandon Jamal Baker, and you're tuned in to Where I Belong with Brandon J. Baker. So I've posted a couple of videos, just coming from my personal standpoint of things, my own personal lived experience. But today I'm actually going to go live, and I want to cover some current topics that are going on right now. So the first topic that I actually want to talk about is very significant because it's dealing with the criminal justice system, and it's also dealing with the culture of music. And this is today, LA County District Attorney Nathan Hawkman held a press conference stating that he is charging the artist David David Burke with the murder of Celeste Rivas Hernandez. He is being charged with first degree murder with the special circumstance, which most people know special circumstance is, how people receive a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. But also something else that DA Hawkman has mentioned is that the death penalty is actually on the table in this case. That's very significant because we live in the state of California. Our Governor Gavin Newsom has spoken out against the death penalty. And so we have a district attorney who is right here in, the city of Los Angeles, in the county of Los Angeles, and he's advocating for the death penalty. Now, this crime that is being alleged here is very gruesome. I will spare you the details because it's public. But I will just express, my condolences to, the Rivas Hernandez family. It's just very sad just to see, that this stuff is actually happening. But the point that I want to make is the ramification for all of you musicians out here. Um, do not think for one second that your lyrics, your song lyrics, are protected through the First Amendment rights. Right now there are people advocating and pushing to protect the First Amendment rights of song lyrics. But, in this case in particular, the DA even admitted like there was no eyewitnesses to the actual crime. There's not really any substantial evidence to the crime. In fact, he's calling out to the public for people to come forward and speak about what they know about this situation. There have been many outlets who have disclosed that some song lyrics have actually played a factor into the arrest of David Burke, in particular his song Romantic Homicide. Um, but I will say that like there's a long history, there's over approximately 700 to 800 rappers, just rappers alone, who their rap lyrics were brought forth into a court of law. Many of them are notable, such as Young Thug. We've seen how that played out with the whole YSL thing. The rapper Mac, we saw how that played out. Little Dirk, who's currently incarcerated right now, and even Uncle Snoop, during his trial. In fact, the song was actually played during the closing arguments. The song "Murder Was the Case." So I just say that to say is that anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. So I know that there's a lot of people within the culture who are promoting a certain lifestyle or portraying a certain image. I can assure you that there is a system that is designed um, to put you in a cage, for the rest of your life. And so I would just advise people to be smart, to be wise. One of my favorite one of my favorite rap artists of all time is Scarface, and he has a song look in my eyes, and he says on there is that the FBI is watching you, and he's speaking to everybody. Like if you're in the entertainment industry, and you are portraying a certain image, um, just be rest assured that there are feds watching you. It's not really hard. And so, and when you're promoting this stuff, then you're actually presenting an easy case for them to come against you. And I always say is like, we witness, the federal agents sit there and infiltrate everything we've ever had. You look at the Black Panther Party, who was doing nothing but good, and yet and still the FBI, had a plan to come and dismantle and destroy, what was built there. So, I mean, they monitored Martin Luther King, So to think that, they wouldn't be monitoring these podcasts, that they wouldn't be monitoring, the music, the people are putting out there, because that's a very real thing. So, that's just really like my spill on that. Like I said, with this situation, just my condolences. My thoughts and prayers, are out, to this family. We have a girl, 14 years old. She is a girl, and it's just really unfortunate. But I just said that to say is that, for all of you out there, once again, when you're going on these podcasts, be careful what you say, because what you say can and will be used against you. um, so there's actually another topic that's going on that I just find to be very interesting, and that's this situation with Ice Spice. Now, the fact that she was just in a McDonald's within itself, to me, is just like, that's mind-boggling alone. Um, then on top of that, you factor in that she was in there without any bodyguards, which was actually kind of crazy. And the fact that, like, you're in the McDonald's without any security in LA County, anywhere in LA County, like, that's even crazier. Um, because for me, I spoke about this a lot. Like, I do not eat McDonald's food. Allegedly, this stuff is not, good for you. There's, a lot of things that have been said. But I'm not here to speculate. But I did see that the owner of McDonald's wouldn't even eat his own food. He doesn't even call it food. So for those reasons, I'm out. Um, so it's like, not only is the food allegedly killing people, um, I don't have to allege the fact that there have been numerous people killed inside of McDonald's, in particularly here in LA County. All one has to do is look back to rest in peace Big Payback, who was a local rapper here, and he was murdered in the McDonald's in Palmdale. This is not speculation. Just a month or two ago, there was a murder right here in East Los Angeles, in McDonald's. So it's like, it's arguably one of the most dangerous locations here in LA County. There have been several people who went there and literally their Happy Meal was their last meal. Um, you know, and so for her to be in there, by herself, all hours of the night, I'm just thankful that she was only confronted with this alleged fan or whatever the situation is. I don't have any details about the particulars of the situation. The only thing I know from my insight is that it's not safe for not just celebrities, but for anybody just to be there, on your own. Because you just never know. I mean, especially seeing someone like of her status, it's not far fetched to think that somebody would want to rob her, expecting her to have money. It just not safe, and it just was not smart to be there in that situation. I mean, we could look at what happened with the late great rapper PNB Rock, and unfortunately he lost his life in the midst of a robbery. So there's a long history of that kind of violence that happens here, in LA County. And so for someone to come from, out of town and just think that like everything is fine, I just don't think that that's wise at all. But when it's all said and done, I'm thankful that that she's okay. You know, because it could have been a lot worse. It could have been a lot worse for Carrot Cake. But like I said, oh, and then also she went outside too. Like there's another video of her like afterwards, after the confrontation, she went outside, and I'm like, that was not smart at all. Because who's to say, this lady didn't have a gun inside her car? She was there with her boyfriend. You don't never know how that situation is going to play out. Um, so once again, I just have advised people like to not think that you're bigger than any program, that's here, because it's really not safe and really not wise. And of all places to go to McDonald's, like I just wouldn't eat that food just at all. Period. Like I've seen the videos. People have Big Macs, that they've just had in their house for 20 years, and the form of it has not changed at all. So that just shows me that it's definitely not safe, and it's probably not wise to be consuming that product. Like I don't even know if I can call it food, so I'll just call it a product. um yeah. And then also there's something else that's actually been going on that's really been weighing heavily on my heart. Has been on my mind. In fact, on my last video I actually spoke about like racism, and specifically within the Black and brown community. I was vulnerable and transparent about my own past experiences with racism, as being on both sides of it, experiencing it, as a victim and also as a perpetrator of that. Um, I gave insight into my ideology and where it came from firsthand experience. But I also talked about how I was able to overcome that, through education. I talked about, my spiritual beliefs and principles, and also just building community with people, that I once had a hatred for. Now I have a love and a great sense of like community with them. So I do believe that people can change. Absolutely. I'm living proof of that. But one thing that I will say is that, first and foremost, people have to educate themselves. Any other race of people. So let's just say, for instance, we have Jewish people, right? You can have somebody like a Nick Cannon, or, any other famous Black celebrity, Kanye or whatever, that says something against this community. Automatically, there is an outcry to cancel this person, do away with this person. People are losing their money. People are losing their careers. And so what happens is that person experiences a quote unquote fall from grace. And in that quiet time, guess what they're doing? They're being led to educate themselves about this group that they made that statement about. And when they come back after reflection and they apologize, not only is it an apology, there's action behind that apology. Because as we know, that an apology without action is just manipulation. So whenever somebody speaks out against the Jewish population, there's not just going to be, oh, we're just going to act like it never happened and just move on according to program. There's some work that's actually being done, right? Same thing with the Asian community, from all different countries. There's always a time of reflection where people will go to museums, people will meet with their leaders, they'll start to educate themselves, and then they'll come back with an apology and they'll share what they have learned throughout that process. But when it comes to Black people, and someone makes a racist comment towards us, we're just expected to just move on according to program. And this is going to lead to the Hoodstocks platform, and Lucky and his racist remarks that he made. And while some would just make light of it and say it was a joke, the African booty scratcher thing, oh, it's in a movie, it's just a joke, he didn't have any hatred, in his heart. And I'm like, well, first and foremost, if you look at the context of that conversation, it was dealing with interracial relationships. And clearly that had nothing to do with prejudice. That had everything to do with hatred. And as I mentioned in my last video, when I talked about me having a racist ideology, and the root of it, where it stemmed from, was me and my best friend being chased by older Hispanic men while we were with Hispanic women, or girls at the time, because I was 13. We were 13 years old. And so to see Black people continue to support this platform and go on this platform, like I saw Akon went on there about a month ago, and it's like, we're just expected to just resume program like this stuff never even happened. And so for me, I believe that, like I said, people, they can't change, but that comes with, first you have to own up to what you did. Don't belittle or just try to look past what you said. Stand up, stand on business. Like if you really are about that, which to me it really appeared like it was like hatred in that comment, in that whole conversation. um, and if that's the case, to stand on it, But if that's not the case, then you need to be able to first and foremost apologize and make amends, and show how you have actually addressed that. You know what I mean? Go to a museum, meet with some leaders, be educated. Like, I mean, it's not really hard to do, but speaking as a black man who comes from a community that is marginalized, and there's predominantly a lot of Hispanics, where I come from, growing up around races is very offensive to me, and I'm sure that there's a lot of people that feel the same way that I do. And for the Hispanics who don't have a racist ideology, when you see stuff like this, then I feel that you should also speak out against it as well too. You should be able to blackball that platform as well too, because when it comes to someone in our community, not only is it other races of people that are quick to counsel that person, we are expected to counsel them as well too. And so I just believe that once again, it just goes back to like we have to set a standard as black people that like, no, we're not gonna accept this. If we're gonna truly push a message of peace, then we have to reconcile, anytime that there's disturbance or turbulence, and that right there, that's just a prime example. And I'm speaking once again, starting first at home base, like as black people, like we shouldn't be going on that platform. I don't care who you are, that money is not, worth, your integrity or your soul if you profess to have that. And then just on top of that, just a lot of these platforms in general, like I said, I'm the kind of person that I try not to say anything negative about anybody, but I will always speak the truth. And so you have people who are talking about street code and gang culture. Number one, when they've never lived in the gang culture, they never went by any street code or conduct, but yet and still they're talking about what's going on in these streets. That's number one. Number two, you talking about what's going on in the street is breaking street code and conduct. Like, so it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, that is literally within itself illogical and it's irrational. For me, like I said, I definitely, could just speak from my firsthand experience, of living that lifestyle in the past. There was just certain things that we didn't do, and there was just certain things that were not, allowable. So for number one, if you weren't there, how are you even able to speak about something when you were not even there? That's like considered weird to me. That's number one. Number two, if you were not affiliate, you definitely were not supposed to be speaking up on anything dealing with gang culture, And so to like see a lot of these people on these platforms talking about gang code, you literally have people solving cases, Flacco. You literally have people on here solving cases. Like, I mean, who says some stuff like that? Like, you know, um, but once again, just to speak about, street code, and gang culture and stuff like that, and you were never a part of it, like that's like crazy to me. And people that support this kind of stuff is crazy to me. And once again, when people are speculating and wondering if certain people on certain platforms are working for the feds, I talked about earlier what Scarface said, FBI is watching you. It's not hard. I went through many cases where song lyrics were brought up in the court of law. It's not far-fetched to believe that the fans are watching these platforms. So if you're going on here and you're talking about other people and you're implementing yourselves in crimes, where there's no statute of limitation, then I'll just have to look at you and say that you're the dummy. And so I just say, man, as a collective, we have to do better, man. That's why like I live my life. Like I said, I spent 25 years in prison. I kept it solid. My background, it checks out. I don't have to promote myself or put my chest out here or none of that stuff because I'm already past that. And I want us as a people to be past that as well, too. And so, like I said, when we get on these platforms, just speak the truth. If you're still in this lifestyle, hey man, more power to you, But if you're not in this lifestyle and you continue to talk about this lifestyle, then you have to expect that there's going to be some kind of consequences for your actions. That's just the reality of it. Like I said, I've been on level 4, 180 prisons, where the politicking was very much real, and it's just certain things you're not going to do. And so, like I said, it's just a matter of, as a culture, what do we want to envision? Like, what do we want to embody? And that actually segues into the next topic that I wanted to talk about. And it happens to be, this whole Chris Brown and Usher thing. Hey man, what's up to the hometown team? I see a couple of you guys in there, shout out, to West Covina. Like I said, always, I love my hometown. That's where I'm from. But yeah, this Chris Brown and Usher concert. I mean, these two, they got these women in the chokehold, bro. I mean, yeah, they got these women in the chokehold. And so for me, it's just like the question I have is like, first and foremost, what kind of man out there is buying women these kind of tickets? Because like I said, for me, it's no way in hell I could be in a relationship with a woman. I'm just gonna say, here, baby, here goes some tickets to the Usher Chris Brown concert. Have fun. Yeah, that's out. Oh man. Yeah, man, that's how. Let's see what we got. How you see life now being free, and what you see that we didn't see when we was kids. Great question. Um, so for me, like since I've been home, man, everything is awesome. Even when it's not awesome, it's still awesome because I'm awesome. Like that's just the energy I bring. I like to elevate any space that I'm in. I always say is that whenever you have gone through darkness, you learn to appreciate the light a whole lot more. Because if you're just living in the light, you living in the sunshine, you don't never know what it's like to experience utter darkness. You're looking at somebody who's overcome depression, attempted to take my life. And even in the times I didn't take my life, the lifestyle I was living, I really didn't want to live. Even when we were teenagers, growing up, a lot of people don't really know, man, when I was homeless, man, I literally just slept at the bus stop on Valley Boulevard and Azusa Avenue, right across from Jack's Market. No gun, no nothing. I'm just sitting there asleep, and at 3 o'clock in the morning. So it's like, if you were around that area, that was somebody who had a death wish. You know what I mean? So it's just for me, like my life every day, I'm thankful. You know what I mean? Like I got a big smile on my face, and it's just like everything is awesome. You know what I mean? And even when it's bad days, I know I went through worse. And so that's where my perspective, it always comes from. I always say like the worst thing of my life I've ever experienced, I got through it. And as for what I didn't see when we were kids that I see now is that they had a plan for us, bro. I talked about it in my last video about like me having a racist ideology growing up in West Covina, surrounded, a La Puente, all these Hispanic gangs. And it was like people was getting killed in the street. And us as kids, as teenagers, we're put in the middle of this stuff. So, when we're going to Nogales High School, we're having riots in the school, getting jumped at Nogallesburg. I wrote about, I got jumped and stabbed at Nogallesburg. I'm 14, 15 years old. And so just to think that like there was a plan that was designed for us to be dead or in prison. I look at all of my peers, and I just want to shout out, man, my pops. I love him, man. Thomas Leach. I promise you, man, like that's my favorite person in the world. Because when I was young and I didn't want to hear what he had to say, now I'm older, I hear everything he said loud and clear, and he never lied to me. Whenever, my friends would come spend a night at the house, Tabari, Ian, Dirty George, Brashan, Karan, shout out everybody, and when they would come over there, man, my pops, like after he'd come in there with all of us and he'd just say, hey, man, y'all probably don't want to hear this, man, but it's 10 of y'all. He said, man, 8 of you guys is going to be dead or in prison. He said, one of you guys is going to make it out and be successful, and the other one is going to kind of be in and out, trying to get their life together. I was like, damn. And I really sat there and I thought about it when I was in prison. I'm like, man, I went to prison. I was 18. Karan was 16. George was 18. Brashan was in and out. Tabari, rest in peace. Ian, so it's just like all these dudes I grew up with, like as kids, look what happened. And so it's just to think that like all of this stuff could have been avoided with mentorship. If we had like the older dudes we was looking up to, if they, and I don't talk bad about those guys because they cared about us. You know what I mean? It's just this was their trauma and this is what they knew how to do. I'm gonna lace you up, little homie. This is how you do this. This is how you handle this situation, right? And they'll hang out with us, drink, smoke, and that was their way of bonding with us, older people. But just to think if like we had older dudes that came home and yeah, hey, for sure, yeah, mom, yeah, said the 77 Coupe de Ville, absolutely, the white Coupe de Ville. And come been in that car, you already know mom's looking for me, man. I'm in trouble again. Um, but yeah, I just think like, what if these older dudes would have came home and just said, "Hey, man, let's just hang out. Well, let's go to a Laker game or something." You know what I mean? We gonna go see the Raiders or the Rams or something. You know what I mean? And we're gonna do something productive. We're gonna teach you guys how to fish, how to put some money in your pockets the legal way. Hey, man, go to school. Hey, man, college might not be for you, but hey, you can get a trade. Hey, you still the homie. It's still the neighborhood. All this stuff. But what we're not gonna do is have you emulating what we did that led us to be dead or in prison at a young age. Like that's insanity to me. And this is why, like I said, for me and how I live my life is just, yeah, I was that person. Anybody knows me, nobody ever gonna say anything bad about me from the streets, from juvenile hall to camp, county jail, prisons, nothing. Like nobody's ever gonna say anything bad about me. They're gonna say the same thing, man. That dude's with the business, this dude's crazy, all this other stuff. But when I look back on it, what was it for? Like it was literally for nothing. The only thing that actually makes sense to me right now is the person I am right now. And that started with me changing my life, me making better decisions, going to school, giving my life to Christ. You know what I mean? Educating myself, basically seeing my own self-worth and presenting my own self-worth to the world. And this is where I am right now today. But at the end of the day, like I still have a heart for the people, and this is why I continue to do exactly what I do. Because like I said, God is not a respecter of persons. I mean, he did it for me, he'll do it for you, and I'm just going to continue to show up because that's just the person that I am. Yeah, so yeah, absolutely, man. That was some great questions. You guys have any more, man? You can reach out, man. That's what it's for. That's the whole purpose of Alive. But I really just look at like, going back to this Chris Brown and Usher concert, because to me, like I said, I couldn't do it. The only thing I'm thinking is you either got to be the side piece or you just got to be a trick, like that's just it, man. And if you are, you in a relationship with this woman and you send her there, you got to be a fool, because yeah. So just for me, like, yeah, for those reasons, I'm out, um, yeah, man. But then also something else I just want to close out with music. So I've been on a lot of these platforms and people talk about my music choice and things of that nature. Like I said, I grew up, man, like I'm a real hip hop historian. We talk about from all genres, East Coast, West Coast, down south, underground. Like I know it all. But I'm just gonna give you guys my top 5 right there, and I'll explain exactly why I chose these 5. Number 1, Tupac Shakur, rest in peace. He always gonna be number 1 in my book. Just because of his impact, the influence he's had over the culture, the longevity of his impact over the culture, even in his death. And I think people have the misconception that he's only this big because he passed away. In fact, I heard Gilbert Arenas say something on his podcast, about Tupac only selling these records because, he, passed away. And I'm like, Gil, you're my age. Like, are you serious? You don't remember 1996 when All Eyes on Me came out? And he had the whole world in the chokehold. I remember, going up to Puente Hills Mall, stealing, going to some Blockbuster Music when they had CDs. Me and Ibram going in there, stealing the CDs and stuff. Yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. So, to me, Tupac, he's always going to be number 1. Absolutely, man. Shout out Sibo. And I thought about him earlier when I talked about, rappers with their song lyrics being used in the court of law. That's another example of someone whose rap lyrics was used against him in the court of law. So once again, anything you say can and will be used against you. So just be smart about that. So Tupac, he will always be number 1 for me. Number 2, Nas. I have to give it up to Nas. For so long, it was always Pac and Biggie, and I didn't think anybody would ever like surpass, them. But I have to give it to Nas. The same thing I say about Pac. The longevity, his impact and influence, within the culture, and his lyricism is literally like it's unmatched. So he has to be number two to me, and I feel him. You know what I mean? Pac and Nas, like them is people that I just feel. Um, and so yeah, that's my one and two. Number three for a long time was my number one, and that would have to be Scarface. He was actually my first favorite rapper. I remember, the first song I ever knew line for line was the Ghetto Boys' "Mind Playing Tricks on Me." Uncle Face, he's always been one of my favorite rappers. So I have to put him at number three, and I think that he's as real as they come. And I talked about earlier what he say in his songs. The FBI is watching you. Period. Like everything the Face ever said, and this is how I view somebody and their impact on their culture in general, but also on me. Like whenever I go throughout my day, like I can hear these song lyrics play out, and I'm like, damn, that's what Face was talking about right there. Look at these dudes, man. They on these platforms, just running their mouth, and then next thing you know, they getting people and going to jail. People, and it's just like this is what he was talking about. But this is coming from somebody who actually lived that life, and he didn't never, really glorify it. But when that someone is really real with it, and so he's definitely that's number three on my list, man. Number four, it have to be Biggie. I have to keep him inside my top five. Even though he's since passed away, so he doesn't have that long of a catalog, but he does have two classic records, "Ready to Die" and "Life After Death." I think that his lyricism is probably just second to Nas. So I have to put him up there. And I can speak personally, even though I'm a Tupac fan and the whole East Coast, West Coast thing was going on, I would be lying if I say we wasn't playing Biggie, if "Life After Death" wasn't in the rotation. You know what I mean? So yeah, I gotta put him up there. And then finally, to round out my top five, it have to be Kendrick. Man, I gotta show some respect to K Dot, who currently, to me, has the culture. If he decides to put out some more music, that's up for debate. But even if he does it, to me, I think he has enough work to where, it's going to stand the test of time. He has the classics, he has a message, he has the lyricism. And I just think that, like, he's definitely in my top five. And I had a chance to meet him. So shout out to K Dot. Yeah, like I said, man, he was just a really cool, humble, down to earth kind of dude, man. So yeah, that would have to be my top five. So if anybody want to debate me, like I said, you guys can reach out, hit me up on Instagram, b.successful81. Just holler at me when you see me, man. So yeah, man, once again, man, this was just a very powerful conversation, a powerful live. Oh yeah, man. And so anytime I think about SIBO, I just think about the one life to live, just man, that was the stuff that we grew up on, I mean? Like, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, man. And I always say this, that art imitates life. You know what I mean? And so the whole purpose of music is to have a message, that's going to connect with your core audience. But I think that we have, really got away from that, what I mean? And I think that we do need to get back to that. And hopefully, we will. But like I said, just moving forward, the message for everybody out there is, to just be thankful for wherever you are. Like I said, man, you can look around you, because I can speak just from my own community. How many of my friends, are not here right now today, you know, and it really hurts. Sometimes I think about, I'm like, damn, man, you're not here to see this. But then I also think about the ones, that are still here. You know what I mean? And I'm proud of all you guys, man. And just thank you, everyone who supports me. But like I said, I believe that you spotted, you got it. So whatever you see in me is first identified in you. So we just got to go out there. We got to pursue greatness. Oh yeah, and then finally, speaking of greatness, please, just for me, anybody out there that is disrespecting Nipsey Hussle, please don't buy into this stuff, man. If people are disrespecting Black Sam, Nipsey Hussle, please just Just don't, man. Let that man rest, man. This dude is a legend. Just let him rest. Like I said, I was there at the Long Beach grand opening of Marathon Burger with Black Sam. And he was just the most humble, gracious dude that you can ever imagine. You know what I mean? If anybody has ever experienced a loss of a loved one, especially a brother, you know, like how difficult that is. And so to be there, you know what I mean, to just keep pressing forward and to make Nip's dreams become reality, that's admirable. You know what I mean? And so once again, going back to that person that I mentioned earlier, who was never a gang member, who was never part of the gang culture and speaking out against the gang culture, this same person decided to run his mouth and he's talking bad about, you know, Nip and Black Sam. And we just need to do not support that stuff at all, man. Do not support that stuff at all. You know, and so when people who are not educated and misinformed and they come with their own opinions to say, see, this is why, you know, you got to get out of your neighborhood. This is why you can't go back and give back to your neighborhood, because it's your own and want to take you down. And so we know at the end of the day, you know, in any movement throughout the history, not just of Black people, but of all people, there's always going to be a martyr. Jesus was a martyr. You know what I mean? There's always going to be somebody, if you really stand on what you believe in, and if your mission is coming from something outside of yourself and is bigger than yourself, your life is just going to be a small thing in exchange for that dream becoming a reality. So, and when I see Nipsey Hussle, like I said, man, I respect that dude hustle. When I see he bought, you know, that whole lot, you know, where he was selling T-shirts and CDs and stuff, and like to see, you know, the deal with Puma renovating, you know, the school playgrounds and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, Destination Crenshaw and all this stuff. And I'm like, that was a format or a blueprint for everybody from every neighborhood throughout America to do the same thing in their community. It was a call to action, but it wasn't just talk. It was him actually doing it. And so when he passed away, unfortunately, there was some who probably thought, man, the marathon is over. It was so much for those dreams. But yet and still we see that the marathon continues. You know what I mean? So I want to salute, you know, Black Sam, you know, and just say that you know, you are supported. You know what I mean? You are supported. Great question. How do I feel about higher education? I love it. Because for me, when I was growing up, first and foremost, like you guys know, you grew up with me, I used to stutter. Like I used to stutter really bad all the way into like my late 20s. I remember being diagnosed with ADHD, given medication and all that stuff. And I just really didn't think that education was for me. I dropped out of school like in the 10th grade. I'm just like, what's the point of going to school? Like I'm not going to college or anything. But that's what I was told. That's what I was told. And as I look back on it now, I know that that was a lie. Because for me, like I always talk about, my education journey was, I got my GED in 2017. I know most people, whoop-de-doo, you got your GED, but for me, that was a big deal. Because I didn't think like I would ever do anything. And the only reason why I got my GED was because I knew I was going to parole board, and I wasn't going to board without that GED because I knew that was going to be an automatic denial. But fast forward, I ended up going to college in 2020 when I was at Lancaster. On B Yard, which was a level 4, my cellmate at the time, he was in college. I wasn't in college, but I'll talk about my buddy Edwin Cruz. He would always come by the door. He was like, and he would ask, you know, my cellmate at the time, hey man, you got your schoolwork, you know, your assignments due and all that stuff. And, you know, my cellmate would be like, oh no, I'll come back tomorrow. And then sure enough, Edwin would come back tomorrow. And I was just like, damn, if this dude is that serious about another man's education, maybe I need to be serious about my own education. So that's where the seed was like really planted. I made it to A Yard in Lancaster, which is level 3. And my cellmate at the time was a college clerk. And the first question he asked me was, hey man, you got your GED? I was like, yeah. He's like, you want to go to college? I was like, absolutely. You know, because I knew that was a sign from God. It was divine intervention and perfect timing. The first class I ever took was logic and critical thinking. And once I took that class, it literally changed the whole perspective of my mind. I felt like those shackles that was on my mind was erased, because what I learned in that class was that everybody in this world has a bias. Like we all have a bias, and it's not based off what we're told, it's based off what we see. And so once I learned that, I had to really question everything that I've ever believed in my life. And so, and after that class, I just told myself, there's no way I can see myself living life without pursuing a higher education. And so, when I was inside, I got multiple AAs. I got one in communication, the other one in sociology, and now I'm here. I'm going to graduate this fall at Cal State Los Angeles. You know, the University of Cal State LA. So and I'm just going to continue my education all the way up to my doctorate because I just believe that education is important. I believe that it's the key to leveling the playing field because having a degree, I know some people, would argue that, oh, you don't need an education to be successful, which is true. There are some people, you can start your own business without, having that education. You can, become a subcontractor and, get a union job and things of that nature. But there's also another level to it with people when they have these degrees. They're privy to a lot of information that people really aren't into. So it's like when you fill out certain job applications, if they say you don't have a BA, don't even apply for this job. You know what I mean? So it gets you into a lot of doors. So I do believe that higher education is important, for the resources and the doors that are open. But more importantly, it's the mind that is being open. And even be able to take it a step further. We come together, we can start writing our own curriculums, because you have lived experience. And your lived experience makes you an expert in whatever field you're in. I fashion myself as an expert in the field of rehabilitation, and what makes someone an expert is lived experience. So, absolutely. So, yeah, man, and definitely, man, 4 foot, man, just keep them in prayer, man. Keep him in prayer. Keep all our brothers and sisters who are incarcerated. Keep them in prayer, because it's not easy being in there. And that's another thing. Oh man, I'm glad you brought that up. To strike that is that man, the brothers and sisters that's in prison with them damn cell phones. My God, my God. I don't judge it because, like I said, man, I had 17 cell phone write-ups. 6 of them, there was multiple phones in the write-ups. So I went on great lengths about, my cell phone addiction and like where it came from. It was just like trauma. Like I said, some people turn to drugs, some people turn to alcohol. Me, I turned to cell phones. Like that was my escape from prison. When I had a phone, I didn't feel like I was in prison. So I get it, But the thing is that number one, when you're found in possession, you get that write-up. Guess what? That's gonna keep you in prison longer than you have to be. Both my co-defendants, they was already out. They got out like, man, 2019, 2018, 2019. And I had to get out 2024 because I was messing with cell phones. You know what I mean? Like that's crazy to me. So it keeps you in there longer. But number two, it's not a good sign for the culture in general because the average person that's never been to prison, when you see some of these videos, what's the first thing you think? Oh, it ain't that bad in there. Oh, they like it in there, And it's like that is the furthest thing from the truth. I spent 25 years in prison. I can tell you not for 1 second did I like it in there. Not at all. Like it's not fun, So I just say at the end of the day, the brothers and sisters that's sitting there, listen, man, we see you, we care for you, we want you home. That cell phone is not gonna determine your level of significance and importance in the world. Just come home. Do what you got to do to come home. Like I always share the story about losing probably the best woman I ever had. And she was telling me, she said that as a man, you never put the things that matter the least in front of what matters the most. And like I said, when she said that, boom, it just resonated with me. And so what I mean is that if those cell phones is what's keeping you in prison longer, then you need to let them go. You know what I mean? So that's just the bottom line. Yeah, but once again, man, this has definitely been a very interesting live. I enjoyed this. My first time actually doing a live here, so I'm just kind of messing with it a little bit, and I'm gonna continue to do it. So stay tuned, stay tapped in. Like I said, man, subscribe, comment, and let's grow this channel. Like I said, because I want you guys all to be a part, of the process. There's nothing that's off table. You guys get in the chats. I'm definitely going to interact. I got something to say pretty much about everything. But more importantly, like I said, it's just about the collective conscious and being peaceful, positive, and productive. Yeah, those riots, man. Anybody that's ever been in a riot, they'll tell you, man, they're not fun. That's another thing. Like I've seen somebody on the podcast, talking about riots, and they're glorifying this stuff, and I'm like, nah. We might have had to see those videos to see what you was actually doing. Um, because my whole time in prison, I've been to several riots in the county jail. In prison, I only been in one riot. I was in one riot. This was 2014, 15, the Calipat A Yard. It was the biggest riot they had there at that prison. Um, 3 people died there inside that riot, and it was not fun. It was not fun. Um, and I just thank God I never had to experience that ever again. Because every time you're in a riot, you're literally playing with your life. Like there's people that are being butchered, not only stabbed by other incarcerated people, but you also have the tower. Those officers in the tower, they got the block guns, but they also got those mini 14s. They got real bullets, and they really will. And those signs, it's in the day room and in the chow hall, it said no warning shots. So, if your loved ones are in riots right now, keep them in prayer, ask for protection, over their lives. So, because it's really it's not good for anybody. But I also know, and I'll just leave this with you guys. Like the first prison I went to was New Folsom. It was level 4, 180. And I could talk about a lot of violence that I saw up there, a lot of violence that I was a part of up there, but I can also talk about the violence that was prevented up there. That's what always stood out to me was diplomacy and how the politics like played out. Like you can't just sit here and think you finna catch a fade with this dude because all his homies finna run across the court, all our homies finna run across the court. We got about 15 knives out here. They probably got about 20, 30 knives out here. And it's just finna be bloody out here. Then the whole yard is going on lockdown. Everybody's gonna be mad. It's gonna catch up to you and they're gonna do something to you. And so for those reasons, let it go. But once again, that's just like my experience, and this is coming from someone who actually lived that lifestyle. Um, exactly. Studio case. And so, like I said, man, I don't glorify that lifestyle, but I could just speak and say that I've lived that lifestyle. You know what I mean? And so, and I know at the end of the day, it hasn't gotten us anywhere, and I want us to get somewhere. And I go back to like someone like Nipsey Hussle. He was somebody that got it, and he literally gave us all a blueprint. This is what we can do. This is all possible, and how we do it. We have to get involved in education. Like I said, education is not for everybody, but it needs to be for some of us. The political realm, politics is not for everybody, but it needs to be for some of us. Entertainment, it might not be for all of us, but it needs to be for some of us. We all need to come together as a collective and come with one vision. And then once you have that one vision, everybody has a part to play. And so I believe wholeheartedly that we're going to get to that place. We're going to get to that place. Let's see. The question they asked you, and they say where you want to be sent if you die there. Yeah, so for me personally, man, like I said, when I die, when I leave this earth, like this fleshly temple, I wouldn't give a damn. Like I said, you could cremate me, you could bury me. Like I don't, because I know like my conscience is not inside of this body. Like this is just a temple, and it's no different than 9/11 Twin Towers being dismantled or anything, our house catching on fire. That house was just the house. What the lasting legacy was the memories that were made inside of that house. And so I try not to get too connected to anything that's external. Prime example, if you ever seen a mother who has lost a son or daughter and they go and identify the body and then they're like crying hysterically and they're like, no, that's not my baby. No, that's not them. And then the people are like, no, lady, like that's your son. What are you talking about? And so I've seen this before, and I'm like, damn, like, lady, you're tripping. Like, that's your son. He's dead. Identify the body. But what I learned was that the body is just a temple. What makes the person is the spirit, it's the animation, And so I remember I saw a documentary about Malcolm X. And at the end of it, there was just an image of him inside a casket. He's lifeless inside a casket. And I'm looking at his body. I'm like, That's not him. That's not him, because the first thing you're going to think about is, the way he spoke, the mannerisms, the tone of his voice. And you're like, that's him. It's the spirit. You know what I mean? And so I just say, it's like, so for me, when I leave this earth, like I said, man, by and by, because I know like where I'm going, and it's more just about like those spiritual connections, not necessarily, the physical. But I have, prepared, for that. Like I said, I took out my life insurance policy and all this stuff, because I also understand like about generational wealth. So since I've been home, I've really gotten into that as well, building generational wealth. And just being financially literate, which is something that I wish that I was taught when I was younger. And so I just love the fact to see like, my peoples out there who are like promoting this stuff. So, yeah, absolutely. Like I said, so we'll definitely have a whole lot more to cover, moving on in the future. And like I said, if you guys want me to talk about anything else, like I said, nothing is off the table. You can reach out, DM me. Hey, man, next time you have a live, can you talk about this, or can you expound on that, or what did you mean by that? And that's what I'm here for, man. So, up until then, man, peace, love, and blessings to all of you guys out there. Be well, and at the end of the day, you have to pursue your happiness. Like that's what it's all about. I'm out here living my best life, but I want to see you live your best life as well, too, man. So once again, man, thank you guys for tuning in. This was the Where I Belong with Brandon J. Baker. You can check out my book. It's available on Amazon. You can check me out on Instagram, b.successful81, and you can tune in to this channel, Where I Belong with Brandon J. Baker. So, last question. Let me see. They tell you as a prisoner where you want to sit if you die, and then ask you. Oh yeah. So, oh man, I could go on, and maybe I would talk about this for like the next podcast. But when you die, the only thing they ask you is like, a family member, like who you want to notify, in the event that you die in prison, which is like actually like a reality. Um, yeah, man. And so I actually seen a good buddy of mine. His name was Tyus Love. He was from out of Rialto, and he was actually my barber, and he passed away like on the basketball court, just collapsed, had a heart murmur, I guess, and he just collapsed and died on that court. Very traumatizing. And I was like right there with him. And I remember, like I said, I'm kind of pressed for time, so I won't go into like the full story, backstory, but maybe we'll get there some other time. But I remember the last thing, like they were playing basketball on the court. It was Crips versus Bloods playing basketball, and he was tired. Like, I mean, he just like slumped over, like he couldn't even breathe anymore. And he was like, I'm done, cuz. Like, this was literally his last words. I'm done, cuz. And he collapsed right there. Boom. And afterwards, so he eventually passed away. His cellmate at the time, they moved him in the cell with me, because if someone dies in prison, they have to investigate. So the cell is being searched and all that stuff. So um long story short, I got to see the ins and outs of what happens when somebody dies in prison, because the cellmate was calling and notifying uh, the family about what was going on with their loved one, because the prison wasn't releasing any information. Like the family didn't know anything; they just hadn't heard from him. Um, and then it was like once they made the body available, the family had to pay to get the body back. So now they're doing GoFundMe's and stuff like that to even pay to get the body back. And so I just share personally, like I'm even getting emotional right now. I'm gonna have to go to the beach or something for some self-care for me, because my biggest fear was never dying. Like I didn't care about dying. I've shared that plenty of times. My biggest fear was dying in prison, because I got to see what it looks like when somebody dies in prison. When it says when you're convicted of a crime, like the judge literally says, Brandon Jamal Baker, you are now officially property of California Department of Corrections. Boom, and slam that gavel. You're property. You're not even a human being. They give you a CDC number. Your name is in all capital letters with a number attached to it. You are an entity. You are literally property, and they own you. And if your family wants you back, they have to pay to get you back. So I let that resonate. Like that's the reality of it. So when people are glorifying this lifestyle, you in prison, come home, period. Like, man, because Yeah, that's the reality, you know. And if anybody out there has lost a loved one in prison, they can pretty much attest that what I'm saying is true, because people can call me a lot of things. Nobody's gonna call me a liar. Like, you know, I'm only gonna speak what I know firsthand, and that's what I saw firsthand. So once again, man, you guys all take care of yourself, man. And just holler at me when you see me, man. Thanks for tuning in.